A dark day for the sport of athletics.
Allegations of an Olympic scandal.
C'est un scandale de grande ampleur.
You must dope, and this is how it's done in Russia.
By saying this here, I'll probably become public enemy number one in Russia.
For 2016, our recommendation is that the Russian Federation be suspended.
Tonight our sport finds itself in a shameful situation.
Such pictures are currently only available in the archives. Russia's athletes, in view of overwhelming evidence of a large-scale doping and corruption system, are suspended. For how much longer, whether also for the 2016 Olympic Games in Rio, a decision is supposed to be made soon. Months ago, Russia promised improvement.
We will banish all those who have a suspicious reputation from the leadership of Russian athletics. In 60 days we will present a renewed athletics with new people. And together with the World Federation IAAF we will implement measures according to its standards.
Spring 2016. The 60 days have long gone by. I want to know whether the Russian leadership has kept its promises. My research again takes several months. New innocent persons were now in office, says Sports Minister Mutko. One of them plays a special role for him, Anna Antselyovich. I can remember this name from earlier research, when she was a member of the staff of the Russian anti-doping agency. She was supposed to organize credible drug testing in Russia. What doping tests in Russia still looked like in 2014 is shown to me by a leaked email in which Antselyovich was named as receiving a copy. Normally the inspector comes to the athlete without notice for drug testing. In this email from Rusada, however, the athlete is requested to simply bring his urine sample to the office whenever it's convenient for him. The Rusada staff member, however, does not appear to be disturbed by such completely irregular doping tests. I received secret recordings of conversations of a female athlete and Antselyovich. The recording proves how test dates are agreed.
Do you want to deliver your drug sample next week, okay? We have plenty of time before autumn, no problem.
The athlete asks Antselyovich,
By which day should I best deliver my sample? We'll do it then in the last days of January.
In another conversation, the athlete asks whether she could not avoid 2 tests in one day.
A controller from the World Federation IAAF has also just called me and wants to come and visit me. But the Rusada also wanted to test me today.
Antselyovich answers,
I'll check that. We don't want to now additionally test you. I will write to the testing company and will then get back to you.
Doping tests by appointment. I have the original recordings of all the discussions, uncut and in full length. In Bonn, the international umbrella organization of all anti-doping agencies in the world has its offices, the INADO. I want to know from its chairman how he rates such a procedure by an employee of an anti-doping agency.
If an official was deliberately telling athletes about testing in order to defeat the doping control, then that official would have to be disciplined. There would have to be a process to explore that, and one of the consequences of that discipline could be that they would be fired.
The Rusada employee who prevented normal doping tests does not deny such agreements when questioned about them. Anna Antselyovich has now made a leap forward in her career. With the support of the Russian sports minister, she has become the head of the Russian anti-doping agency. Doping tests in Russia, for years now often simply a farce. The Rusada is suspended by WADA for corruption and manipulation in the doping control system. For months now, therefore, the agency may not conduct any more doping tests in Russia, in athletics and all other sports. British inspectors have to help out now, and the man who is responsible for the failings of Rusada and remained silent about it for years was dismissed. He is now dead. The remains of the former Rusada chief lie since February in Moscow's Kovanskoye Central Cemetery. Nikita Kamayev had surprisingly spoken to several Western journalists at the end of 2015. He wanted to publish a book, and according to one of his friends, despite anonymous threats, was already working on the manuscript. Shortly afterwards, Kamayev was dead. Like another ex-official of the organization, quite suddenly. Official diagnosis, heart failure, at 52. The shock was deep. Not everyone in Russia believes it was a natural death, because Kamayev knew a lot. What he wanted to tell the world, he took to the grave. In Cologne, I will learn more about the suspected extent of fraud in Russia. I have an appointment with the scientists of the world's leading doping control laboratory at the sports university. What they show me is currently all the rage on the doping scene. Meldonium, brand name Mildronat. A heart drug, patented in Latvia but especially popular among athletes in Russia. Meldonium is quite something.
There are several studies and evidence that it significantly improves the physical and mental load capacities and, in fact, also leads to more rapid regeneration.
Already in 2004 at the Olympic Games in Greece, researchers established in one study that, above all, athletes from the former Soviet Union preferred to resort to making use of meldonium. Not yet banned, meldonium was increasingly becoming a mass drug in sport. Nowadays, it's one of the recognized doping substances.
Since meldonium was banned in January 2016, every urine sample is tested and checked with respect to meldonium. And we continue to have a significant number of positive results, among whom also, as reported, Eastern European athletes are to be found.
Does that mean that with a reasonable degree of certainty, athletes from Russia are also involved?
Of course, you cannot rule that out.
I want to know more about that. And take a look at a comprehensive Russian study from 2015, just before meldonium was added to the prohibited list. A shocking result. In 724 of 4,316 urine samples, the Moscow researchers found meldonium. That means 17% positive tests. In other words, almost 1 in 5 Russian athletes had traces of meldonium in their bodies. And there is evidence that even in 2016, many Russian athletes still make use of the drug, although it is now prohibited. How many athletes are currently really cheating in Russia is impossible to say. On the last weekend in February at the Winter Championships of the Walkers on the Formula One circuit in Sochi. Most of them here have not been tested in the past few months, because the national monitoring system has completely collapsed. It represents a free pass for potential fraudsters in one of the most doping-infested disciplines of them all. There were dozens of doping cases in recent years, with shady coaches in the background. The sports leadership provides assurances that all coaches involved in doping had been removed, no longer work for Russian athletics. I want to check that. Russian whistleblowers inform me confidentially that some coaches have hidden themselves away in the provinces, but secretly continue to carry on their activities, coaching top athletes. The list of results of a regional competition far away from Moscow. This name seems familiar to me. Moknev, listed several times as the coach of participating athletes. Is it the same Moknev who had already been suspended by the IAAF because of massive doping allegations in the course of the Russian doping scandal? Who still faces a lifetime suspension? I want to find out the truth. A Russian logs in on my behalf from Germany into a social network, pretending to be a junior Russian athlete. She makes contact with one of the athletes appearing in the list of results.
What is your coach called?
He replies, Vladimir Moknev.
I'm 18 years old, run the 400 meters in 52.36 seconds. Does that mean I have potential to join Moknev's group?
You really must speak to him personally.
Where can I find him? Where do you train?
Normally in Kursk, but at the moment in Gubkin. Gubkin, a place that I had never heard of. I ask a Russian colleague if he would look at it in more detail for me.
The place is called Gubkin in central Russia. Would you go there? Okay.
A trip into the Russian provinces to Gubkin, 600 kilometers south of Moscow. Under normal circumstances, not too many athletes find their way here. It's the end of February. Gubkin is not far from the Ukrainian border, an administrative center with a population of 80,000. Does the coach Moknev, who is suspended worldwide, continue to coach his athletes here, unnoticed by the international public? In order to find out, my colleague will stay here for several days. A publicly accessible training hall. My colleague films with an unobtrusive camera, poses as an amateur runner, and completes training laps every day. And sure enough, every day a small group of top athletes are here. And then Vladimir Moknev also appears. First only for a few minutes, then longer. In order to rule out any error, my colleague films for 4 days with his little camera. Moknev is regularly there, always together with the same training group. It's clear that Moknev is the responsible coach here. Whether with or without the knowledge of the Russian sports leadership is difficult to judge. The fact that Moknev continues to coach his athletes does not appear to disturb anyone locally. Our reporter has made these recordings, as the website of the New York Times, 9th of February 2016, confirms, right in the middle of Moknev's period of global suspension. And Moknev is no small fish. He's a top coach. And of all things, the man who once coached the whistleblower Yulia Stepanova to her greatest successes. Without their secret audios and videos from Russian athletics, the Russian doping scandal would never have seen the light of day. A few days later, the Russian Winter Championships in Moscow. Russian television is broadcasting live. The athletes who we've seen in Gubkin, for example, are taking part. The sprinter Andrei Chernesov,
Второй Павел Миренков, дорожка Андрей Чернышов.
And the middle distance runner Yekaterina Kupina. Following the championships, I take a look at the list of results. The official reports of the Russian Athletics Federation. The reports indicate who have prepared the athletes for the championships. The suspended doping coach Vladimir Moknev, even officially listed by the Russian Athletics Federation as a current coach. The doping coach Vladimir Moknev continues nevertheless, and the Russian Federation even knows about it. I want to know even more now, whether even more incriminated coaches are still active on the scene. One informant told me about a very big fish. He was the successor to the notorious Sergei Portugalov, the man who was considered the mastermind of doping in Russia for decades. In our first television documentary about doping in Russia in 2014, recordings made with concealed cameras put him under great suspicion. It was obvious.
You responded wonderfully to the medical aids at that time, as if someone had provided you with a turbo drive.
Does Portugalov really have a successor? Back to the Russian Championships in Moscow, just over a week ago. My informant tells me that the man who is now replacing Portugalov to provide doping substances to the athletes was in the hall. He films him discreetly. His name, Yuri Gordeev. A head coach who coaches numerous young athletes in an Olympic sports center from Penza in southwest Russia. He conducts his dirty work right here in the midst of the championships, directly from the stands. Is that true? I have his phone number. In order not to be identified, my Russian informant calls Gordeev using a fictional Skype name. We have to be cautious because this man is supposed to have good contacts to the secret services. He pretends to be calling from St. Petersburg. My name is Sergey. I'm from St. Petersburg. We were advised to ask you. We need to buy substances for our guys to get fit for the summer.
Well, I'm in Penza at the moment.
And you also come to Moscow?
Yes, in the near future I'll be there.
We need oxandrolone and primobolan.
That's possible. Let's do it later when I'll be in Moscow. I'll call you back. I only need your number.
That comes in brown jars, doesn't it?
Not necessarily. There are different ones. One comes from Shanghai, but that is not really something to discuss on the telephone.
Do you also have clean testosterone?
Yes.
And have you got everything in stock?
Yes, of course, but let's not discuss it anymore on the telephone.
The phone call with Gordeev was made just a couple of days ago, in the middle of the week of the championships in Moscow. Yuri Gordeev, obviously a coach and drug dealer at the same time. We're in possession of the conversation in its original form, uncut and in full length. In his official main job, the man coaches young hopefuls of Russian athletics. At the Olympic Sports School in Penza, a state school, the suspected doping dealer thus receives his salary from tax revenues from Russia's national sport promotion, which in turn comes from the Kremlin. A few days ago, I showed the head of the IAAF task force the latest secret recordings and asked for his opinion. The head of the IAAF task force wrote to Sport Inside this week. He regarded the fact that the suspended coach Vladimir Mokhnev currently continues to coach athletes as a serious matter. The audio recording of the coach who offered doping substances for sale during the championship week proves a clear violation of the IAAF anti-doping rules. We will consider these new allegations against Russia in detail, says Rune Andersen, the Norwegian head of the commission. The sports leadership in Moscow, however, continues to claim that it will have cleared up its doping problems in good time for the Olympics. Is that believable? With an anti-doping agency whose chief once advised athletes of the dates of doping tests, an association that allows a suspended doping coach to continue to operate, and a coach who, undisturbed, offers doping substances for sale right in the middle of competitions? The belief in a renewal is difficult. The culture of cheating and doping, it seems to be unbroken in Russia. Leipzig. German indoor championships a week ago. In Germany and many other countries around the world, the situation of Russian athletics has been observed for months with great concern. Most demand unrestricted consequences against Russia, without exception.
Well, the responsibility clearly lies with the Russian Federation, which is of course responsible for providing the sport with an organization which credibly battles against doping. Obviously, the situation in Russia has not substantially changed, which means in consequence that the conditions for Russian athletes competing in Rio are not fulfilled.
The Olympic Games without Russia's athletes? It would be historically unprecedented, one of the world's most successful athletics nations. There would not be such images in a few months in Rio. IAAF President Sebastian Coe is under enormous pressure. His organization, already shaken by massive cases of corruption, must now find an answer to the crisis in Russian athletics. There is also pressure from the IOC. Thomas Bach, the German IOC president, already praised the Russians several months ago for their apparent cleanup measures. A powerful signal, he said. There was the full support of the IOC. And he was certain that will definitely provide clean Russian athletes for the Olympic participation. What Bach did not mention was his strong attachment to the Russian President Putin. It's clear the IOC would like to see the return of the Russians to the international athletics family. The IAAF Council is faced with making one of the most difficult decisions in its history. But is this body to be trusted?
Weather on arrival. It's a westerly breeze up to around 30 kilometres an hour, scattered cloud about 20.
I'm on the way to Malaysia, on the trail of a man who could have an influence on whether Russia's athletes will be competing in Rio. The Council of the IAAF consists of 27 members. Several of them are already suspended after the reporting in Sport Inside on grounds of possible involvement in doping and corruption scandals. The question is whether soon another one will be added to them. I've arranged to meet Daniel Balagopal. He is a top official on the National Olympic Committee of Malaysia, and he shows me many confidential documents. It's a matter of a doping case involving a Malaysian athlete, but above all, about a man who has been suspected for years of supporting and covering up doping practices in Malaysia. Karim Ibrahim, currently the country's most high-ranking athletics official.
It is clearly evident from the independent inquiry headed by very prominent judges of the country, that he was involved in the doping case of this particular athlete who was found positive during the SEA Games. The special inquiry clearly adduced evidence to the fact that he was instrumental in bringing this Bulgarian coach and doctor to Malaysia and to be involved in the so-called centralized training in Miri, where this doping took place.
There are further serious allegations against Ibrahim, who is also well connected in the IAAF.
6 other athletes who were, prior to their training stint in Mannheim and Bulgaria, were told by the Karim Ibrahim to go away without going for the test, because the Institute Sport Science wanted to do a test, a doping test, and he told them to just go away without doing the test, and he will handle the rest.
When asked by Sport Inside, Karim Ibrahim denied all allegations about him personally with respect to doping. But the burden is staggering. Despite the concrete evidence, the president of the Malaysian Association strangely was never sentenced in his home country. Balagopal has been appealing for many months to the leaders of international sport to intervene. He does not want the scandal to be swept under the carpet. He wrote, for example, to Seb Coe, IAAF president, to WADA president Craig Reedy, informed staff of the anti-doping department of the IAAF, approached the ethics commission of the IAAF.
Did Sebastian Coe react? Did he reply to your letters?
Disappointingly, no. He didn't even acknowledge my email and my second email requesting for an appointment with him in Kuala Lumpur.
Did the WADA president, Craig Reedy, react, or did he reply to your letters?
No, negative.
Nothing?
Nothing.
No one replied?
No one replied.
Did the ethics committee of IAAF react to your letters?
Negative.
No one?
No one.
Sebastian Coe, the IAAF president, knew about it. WADA president Craig Reedy also knew, and nevertheless the Malaysian guilty of doping was delegated by the Continental Association in autumn 2015 to the IAAF Council. There was no objection from IAAF President Sebastian Coe. The matter is now in the hands of the Ethics Commission, it is said, and as a result, none other than the man who is himself confronted with massive doping allegations will be involved in the decision as to whether Russia's athletes may or may not compete at the Olympic Games.
Well, if you ask me, it's a joke, simply because they have now a new member in the panel who's going to make this decision against Russia, and he himself has got a bad track record, and especially in doping. And to me, it doesn't make sense. And it appears like IAAF has lost direction.
And while the top officials appear to be mutually protecting each other, the Russian whistleblower who uncovered the huge doping scandal involving Russia is forced to live in exile, in fear and uncertainty. Vitaly Stepanov, his wife Yulia and their little son Robert were forced to leave their home in Russia for reasons of safety following the revelations, and now living at a secret location in the world. I call them on Skype. That is currently the safest way.
I do not feel safe for my wife going back to Russia right now because of the things that were happening in the last few weeks with the ex-directors of Rosada, and they still treat her as a liar and a traitor. They are doing absolutely nothing to clean up athletics now. They are continuing to lie to World Anti-Doping Agency and to International Athletics Federation.
I hope I will soon get permission to start again from the IAAF. I want to show the world that as an athlete you can also compete cleanly.
Yulia Stepanova, like all Russian athletes currently suspended, continues to train. She hopes that the IAAF, on the basis of her services in uncovering the scandal, will give her an individual right to start at the Olympics in Rio. Or will the IAAF continue to ignore the courageous whistleblower and bow down before the enormous sport political influence from Russia?
That our team will be disqualified from the Games in Rio, I can exclude this development.
But there are increasing voices that reject the Olympic start of Russian athletes in Rio. In a few days' time, the IAAF Council will meet. The pressure on the IAAF is great.
Based on our knowledge today, the Russian Athletics Federation and its athletes should not compete in Rio.
The future of Russian athletics. Following the latest revelations, they could look even bleaker.